Each of us has a little tank commander inside our head, this me that we think we are. This small self wakes up each day and goes out into the world and tries to be happy. We are deeply identified with this small self. We think it's who we are. There are two questions we're going to ask in this module. What exactly is this self? And is it who we really are? This self that we feel we are really has three aspects to it: a historical self, an emotional self, and a future self. Our historical self gives us our identity. This is the story we tell the world and ourselves about who we are. Our emotional self is our inner self, the never-ending series of emotional states we find ourselves in, each sliding into the next. And our future self is what we are always moving towards, a me that is more happy or more secure, or just a little more complete in some way. All three aspects of this self, our evolving story of identity, our ever-changing emotional states, and our constant maneuverings towards our future self, are actually made up of one thing: mental activity in the present moment. It is our deepest conviction that all this mental activity adds up to a self, and this self is who we are. So I want to rephrase the original question slightly. Is this mental activity who you are? Or is all this mental activity just something that's occurring? A tunnel you're stuck inside of? We do go through the world in a tunnel of sorts, one in which our self is always at the center. This tunnel is being generated moment by moment by the interplay of 5 sorts of mental activity. We're going to look at each of these in detail, but a quick overall summary would go like this. There is the tank commander, of course. Most of us need no introduction to our tank commander. This is what runs our lives. We go out each day and try to be happy, and our little tank commander is in charge of this. The tank commander relies on a radar system. The radar system evaluates problems and threats and presents them to the tank commander. Then there is the voice in our head, our narration about what's going on in the world. Woven into this narration is an argument. We are always engaged in some sort of argument or disagreement with the world. Lastly, there is always a trial going on deep inside of us. We ourselves are on trial in some way, and the evidence the world seems to generate is being constantly presented. It is the constant interplay of these 5 mental processes that generates the various emotional states that we're always in, this self that we believe we are. Let's look more closely at each of these, beginning with the tank commander. As we said, he or she needs little introduction. We are always surrounded by people, objects, and situations, and the ongoing activity that fills much of our lives is our attempt to arrange all these things in a way that leads towards a situation of happiness or completion. The things, people, and situations we want, we try to draw nearer. Those we don't, we try to push away. So this is what we do every morning of our lives. We wake up, go out into the world, and tank command. Our radar scans our environment constantly for threats and opportunities, and presents these to the tank commander. 10,000 years ago, on the plains of Africa, this radar worked magnificently to identify wild animals, enemies, water, and so on. In our modern world, this radar predominantly identifies psychological threats or problems. A co-worker who seems to be angling for our promotion. The nagging fact that we are not sticking to our diet. Our partner who just cannot remember to close the refrigerator door. The problem with radar is this: it operates in a searchlight fashion. It isolates and identifies problems and ignores the rest of the world. But it presents its findings to us as how things are. That what is going on in the world is that the co-worker is trying to steal our job, We have no willpower to stick to a diet, and our partner is thoughtless. It presents a threat-centric, egocentric, and problematic view of reality to us as the world. This leaves us in a constant state of unease and tension. This ends up being our baseline sensation of ego, the feeling of me struggling against the world. We are all intimately familiar with our narrative, the voice in our head that's always there, labeling and evaluating everything we see. What we don't notice is this. By constantly layering our narrative on top of everything that's going on, we end up living in our narrative of the world, and not the world itself. This is especially dangerous when our narrative, as it inevitably does, begins to deploy concepts. When our narrative inserts concepts like girlfriend or homeless guy into its narration of the world, we start thinking those things really exist, that there really is such a thing as my girlfriend or homeless guy. We end up moving through the landscape of our concepts. Instead of moving through and interacting with the world, we are moving through and interacting with our narrative of the world. Inevitably, this puts us in conflict with the world, because the world never follows our narrative. And our narrative, our girlfriend, is capable of remembering to close the refrigerator door. Homeless guys should not panhandle so aggressively, and so on. This leads us to the next aspect of this ego tunnel: argument. In attempting to reconcile your narrative with the world that is actually occurring, you find yourself in a never-ending argument with the world. Your girlfriend does not match your expectations of how she should be. The city should do a better job with the homeless problem. Your colleague at work should not be sucking up to the boss in order to get a promotion. This is how we end up with this ongoing sensation we have that things are never quite right around us. And this becomes yet another layer of tension in our sensation of self. Finally, there's always a trial going on inside of us. We can't get the world to match our narrative. We're not arranging things well enough. People don't respond the way we want them to. And all this gets presented in our inner trial as evidence against us, that in one way or another, we are just not doing things right. We are not enough. Our emotional states become dark. When the evidence swings the other way, when we are included, valued, respected, and so on, the trial inside us begins to go in our favor. We are okay. Our mood is good. Life is good. Our emotional states lighten. So what seems to be happening is this. Rather than a self that moves through the world, there is a self that is always arising in response to the world, as the unending flow of emotional states that these 5 processes are constantly generating. Now here's something I want you to notice. All 5 aspects of this small self are generating tensions that the resulting self can never resolve. The tank commander can never completely order the world. Radar believes the world to be basically hostile to self. Narrative can never make the world follow its storyline of how things should be. So the resulting argument with the world never ends. All of this gets presented subconsciously at your trial within, where you are trying to decide if you are worthy enough to be here in this world. And this trial can never be resolved, because the evidence never stops coming in. All these unresolved tensions arise as the self you feel you are from moment to moment. The constant tension of our unresolved struggles with the world becomes our physical sensation of ego, a self that exists in opposition to the world. These tensions and the unending stream of emotional states they produce form a continuous, unbroken psychological experience. We identify with this experience, and we think this is who we are. Here's what I want you to think about. This entire psychological experience is being produced by mental activity in the present moment. It is content, not container. Zen calls this the small self, the me inside of you that you believe you are. You think it's inside of you, but you are really spending your life inside of it.